You're tuned in to Evolve, a series dedicated to the evolution of technology, society, and business. With Aarron Spinley. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the premiere of Evolve. Now, as befitting a premiere, today I have an absolute rock star for you. I've known Joe Pine's work for a long time, but I haven't known Joe himself for that long, so I was so excited when I reached out to him last year and I asked him to do this premiere with me, and he said yes without just a moment of hesitation. In the mid-90s, Joe, together with his business partner Jim Gilmore, discovered what we now know as the experience economy. They were researching and writing, and in 1998, together, they coined the term the experience economy in the Harvard Business Review, and a year later, released their seminal work, a book of the same title. Joe serves on 7 different learning institutions in the US and in Europe. He's on 2 different editorial groups and strategy boards. And he's the co-founder of the European Centre of the Experience Economy. Friends, there's simply no one with more authority on the subject and the DNA of the experience economy. Well, hey Joe, and welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on, and particularly a real privilege to have you headline the premiere of Evolve for me.
It's a pleasure, Aaron. Thanks for asking me.
In my piece to camera, I introduce you, and I tend to do that for the guests before having them sit through me, destroying their career history in front of them. I was really interested in we didn't go through everything, but there's a big contribution that you make to academia, particularly, and I look at my notes here around the roles of a lecturer, a visiting scholar, visiting professor, but interestingly to me, you don't regard yourself as an academic at all, right?
No, not really.
Yeah, and I think not many people would know that you worked for IBM for a long time. People
13,
that do,
yeah.
13 years. Well, people that do know at least your name and know Joe Pine as kind of these one of the leaders of thinking around business dynamics today, and they think. In terms of, I guess, your story or Joe Pine's life started in 1998, right? As far as that kind of public persona is concerned. But I'd love the backstory, who was Joe Pine? What was the journey before that? And maybe touch on, your collaboration with Jim Gilmore as well. We should do a shout out to Jim. We really appreciate all his work with you as well. I'd love that background.
Well, I am a geek from way back, or at least my wife says I aspired to be a geek. I was really a nerd, even though she didn't know me till much later. I started using computers actually in elementary school. My dad was in computers. He worked for IBM for a short time, but he was into the computer industry in the late 1950s. He worked on the ARPANET, before the internet was ever
Wow.
invented, and we actually had a teletype in our home in Palo Alto, California. And I won't, if you don't know what a teletype is, go look it up on Wikipedia. You'll be amazed at the way we communicated with computers back then. And so I actually decided to become a computer programmer in 7th grade, and then got a applied mathematics degree to move towards that, and joined IBM. And it started in very technical jobs in Rochester, Minnesota, where we developed the AS400 mini computer. And by the time that came out, I moved up into management and managed a group of people that brought customers and business partners into the development process. And it was a big thing at IBM at the time. We'd never actually talked to customers before we produced a computer before. And this allowed us to really to improve the quality, to enhance the system, to get applications available on day one. That was the first time that had ever happened. And through that process, though, what I learned is that every one of those customers was unique. They wanted to use the system in different ways and connect it to different hardware, different software, different data. They were unremittingly unique. And we had designed the AS400 for this large mini computer marketplace, that simply didn't exist. And so I moved from there into strategic planning and discovered the book Future Perfect by Stan Davis, right? He's my intellectual idol. And I think his book is as applicable today as when he wrote it back in 1987, if you can believe that. And he coined the term mass customization. And when I read that chapter on mass customizing, it was like the heavens opened up and the angels sang, because it explained exactly what I was seeing with all these customers I was now talking to. So I worked to get that into our plans and strategies, and IBM, partly as a reward for that work, sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree in the management of technology. And I took that opportunity, and I found out I had to write a thesis, that I was going to write a thesis I could turn into a book. And that's what I did, you know, and I outlined a book for my thesis. I got done what I could get done at MIT, where I got a book contract with Harvard Business School Press. When I got back to IBM, I joined the IBM consulting group that gave me time to finish it. And in late 1992 was my first book, Mass Customization, The New Frontier in Business Competition. And so that's the one way back here. And so that sort of set me off. You know, I was doing client executive education in the IBM Advanced Business Institute. And IBM in mid-1993 offered my wife and I, she worked there too, both a 6-month salary to leave. And I thought, well, let me see if I can make it on my own. And so I did. And it was, and then I needed clients. So that's when I contacted Jim Gilmore. He had contacted me a few months before when I still worked at IBM, and he said that when he first saw it on a bookstore shelf, his reaction was, "Oh shoot, somebody else had already written it," because he was focused on mass customization. So we sparked up a friendship, and then collegiality. And then we started writing together, and so we joined forces in January 1996 to create Strategic Horizons. We actually have a third partner too, I should mention, in case he's listening, and you know,
absolutely.
That's Doug Parker. Doug Parker worked for Jim when he was at CSC Consulting, and we brought him over as our marketing guy. Right, our business model was 2 gurus and a marketer, and Doug has become so much more. Right, you know, well, we're doing our research, doing our writing, speaking around the world, teaching and whatnot. You know, he's back in the home office and does absolutely everything else, and we couldn't exist without him.
That's fantastic. Well, shout out there as well. Great teams, right? It's all about teams today. I kind of have, before I jump into some questions here, a little bit of a confession to make. I find
you're a stalker.
Yeah, that's right. My name's not Aarron Spinley at all.
Right.
I'm about to ask you a whole bunch of very personal questions. No, I find in my work, and I'm pretty sure that you will have as well, certainly probably more than me, that when you talk about growth strategy with people, you talk about the experience economy, you talk about digital Darwinism, these sorts of concepts, people have heard the term, particularly the experience economy, but almost in very generalist terms, right? I mean, lots of people love to throw a word in front of the term economy. We have a gig economy. We have a consumption economy.
I hate that.
Yeah, right. And they kind of, it gets, I heard one the other day, we have an API economy, right?
Oh, okay.
It gets lost, and people begin to think about the experience economy as kind of like a marketing slogan for people that want to sell digital technology, or a creative agency trying to sell services, or it's a management consultant buzz term or something like that. And it's lost on them that it's actually one of the 4 economic eras. And it has, distinct attributes, and it consists of distinct economic offerings. And it's about this progression of value that you talk about a lot. And so what I'd love to do today, and I know you've done a lot of this, I promise we'll get to some of the more up-to-date thinking as well, or the new thinking, is really get back to basics a little bit. This notion of, our progression from sort of an agrarian society into, the industrial era, and then the services revolution, and where we find ourselves today. So it's easy to talk headlines, but there's a lot behind those things. I'd love you just to unpack that a little bit as a foundation piece. Where did we start? How did we evolve economically? And I guess that speaks to societally as well. And where are we now?
But, I do believe, like you, that we should reserve the term economy for these big fundamental shifts, right? Not just in how business gets done, but in the society overall, and things that have worldwide implications that affect, almost everybody. API
Right.
economy, right? How many people does that, actually affect that are working on APIs? Like normal consumer doesn't even know what the term means for crying out loud.
Yeah.
There are, so what most economists recognize is three fundamental economies: the agrarian economy, the industrial economy, and the service economy. So the agrarian economy lasted for millennia, and it was basically where you extract commodities out of the ground. The commodities are the basic economic offering in the agrarian economy. Farmers and that would plant wheat and corn and apples and they would have pigs and cows, and all of these are basic commodities, right? They are what they are. And then they'd extract them and sell them on the open marketplace, right? That's the basis of the agrarian economy. If you go back to the year 1776, and Aarron being from, is it Australia or New Zealand? I sometimes get confused.
Well, I'm a dual citizen, so I'm not offended with either one. I'm born in New Zealand. I live in Australia.
So, for being down under, right down there, you may not know what happened in 1776, but it's a very important year because, of course, in 1776 was when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, and the first really economic book out there. Something else happened in the U.S. then, but I forget what it was. But if you go back to then, how many people would you guess, Aarron, in the U.S. at least? I don't know the Australian statistic. I'm not sure Australian was a country in 1776. Now that I think about it,
right.
But what was percent of people would you guess in the U.S. What were worked on farms in that time?
Oh, look, I'm going to say 90%, maybe more.
Exactly. It was over 90%, right? But what's that percent today? It's actually less than 2.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say less than 10.
We've gone from 90% of the people to less than 2% of the people. Why? Because thanks to productivity improvements and technological improvements, it takes fewer and fewer people to produce more and more output. Right, so the agrarian economy has gone down in employment and GDP, and of course not just in the U.S. but around the world. There are still many countries that are undeveloped that have subsistence farming and there where agriculture is a primary thing. But in all developed economies, it's a very minor part of the economy, and not that it's ever going to go away. So then in the beginning of the late 1700s in England, and then over in the US, and then across to other developed countries, happened the Industrial Revolution. And that created the industrial economy, where goods became the predominant economic offering. What most consumers bought was finished goods rather than buy the commodities and make the goods themselves, right? Or even kill the animals themselves and for dinner and whatnot. Instead, they pay other people to do that. So if you go back, the turn of the 20th century to 1900, over 50% of the people in the U.S. were in manufacturing jobs at that time, and over 40% were still in agrarian and commodity jobs. But that percent today is gone down below 8% in the U.S. From almost 50% down to 8% of the people in just a little over 100 years. Because again, thanks to technological and productivity improvements, it takes fewer and fewer people to produce more and more goods. So in the 20th century, what happens, we shifted into a service economy. And services weren't even recognized as a distinct economic offering until the late 1800s. Adam Smith didn't recognize them. He said services were of no value whatsoever, right? Even though they were what got goods to market and so forth. He said, doesn't matter. The real value is in the commodities and the goods. So it took over 100 years to recognize services. But by the time if you look back to the 1950s, is probably when services first overtook goods as the primary economic offering, as what consumers wanted, as the major component of employment, of GDP. And that continued to grow and grow and grow until it became, by the 80s, 90s, it became over 80% of the economy. So but what's happened is that goods and services have both become mere commodities, right? They've been commoditized, right? Not true commodities economically, but they're treated as commodities. Right. When people don't care about the features or the benefits, they don't care about the brand. They're all pretty much the same thing. they come to care about three things and three things only, and that's price, price, and price, right? That's when goods and services have been commoditized. So what that means is that it's time to shift to a new level of economic value, to go beyond the goods and services to staging experiences for your customers. So the most important thing, in fact, if all your listeners, all your watchers only heard one thing today, got one thing out of it, this is what I want them to understand, that experiences are a distinct economic offering, as distinct from services as services are from goods. Basically, when you use goods as props and services as a stage to engage each and every individual in an inherently personal way, and thereby create a memory, which is the hallmark of the experience. So that's what experiences are. And what's happened, since we first wrote the book, and we discovered the experience economy in like early 1994, first wrote about it in 1996, came out with the first book on it in 99, now the third edition, the experience economy competing for customer time, attention, and money, has just been published in the last 6 weeks. And now we can say we're truly in an experience economy, where experiences have become the predominant economic offering. They're what consumers and increasingly business people want over goods and services as they all become mere commodities.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, it's I know you could probably break that down for 3 days, because I know there's so much to that, but that's a really great sort of foundation setting. And I know, see, for me, one of the things I find interesting is that the early work that you were doing with Jim in 94, 96, 98, this kind of period that led up to the book, and all that critical thinking that was done then, and correct me if you disagree, but I feel like it's actually more relevant today, or at least it's more material in the way that we're seeing business operate today, and how a business should operate tomorrow, than almost it was in 98. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Is that like people sometimes would accuse us of being futurists, and we say, well, we don't tell you what's going to happen in the future. We tell you what's happening now, but you don't yet see it. And not as many people saw it back in the 1990s. Here, you can't help but see it. When we first started talking about it, we used to have to argue with people that this was going on and show economic statistics and all these examples and why and wherefores and so forth. Now, most people, I just say, hey, goods and services are enough. People want experiences now. We've entered an experience economy. And people go, well, yeah, of course.
They get it.
Because they see it all around them. It's in the air. And so more and more companies have embraced the experience economy and are using its principles, whether they're getting them from us or from all the other books that are now being written about it. They're using principles of experience design to be able to create those engaging, memorable, personal experiences.
Yeah, and it's, what's interesting to me is in the same year that you released the first book, Schwartzway was coining the term digital Darwinism. And in many ways, he was talking about the web, right? In many ways, what we've seen in the last decade just concluded is really placed on steroids those concepts as well. So 99 was a big year. and when I think about it, and I know you've spoken about this, so this is a little bit of a segue for you to talk a little bit more. I mean, my work is a lot often around how technology is affecting society, and society in reverse affects technology. And we're in this kind of infinite loop now, and businesses are trying to keep up with that and find ways to leverage and grow within that dynamic. And I know one of the great changes, even if you talk mobile, it's connecting back to the internet. If you talk social, it's connecting back to the internet. So one of these foundational of the big three, if you like, of internet, mobile, and social has been the internet. And you've talked about the internet being a great form of commodity or a force of commoditization. Explain that a little bit more for people.
Well, the internet originally was a wondrous new arena in which we could have experiences. People don't use this term much anymore, but back then the big term was surfing, right? You surfed the internet. The notion was you were, you're moving around from site to site. You were having all these sights and sounds that are delivered to you personally, right, on your computer. And you're sliding over this and just letting it wash in on you. And
I forgot about that term. I forgot about that.
Yeah, see, you don't even remember the term surfing.
Yeah.
So, but what happened was the internet became probably not 1999. I'm trying to think of when did we first say this. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 2002 or 3, I'm guessing, that we first said this, which is that the internet is the greatest force of commoditization ever invented. Because what happens is websites develop and companies got all these websites, particularly as Amazon, became a big thing. It was the #1 element in this, is that the frictionless marketplace meant that customers can instantly compare prices from one vendor to another, and it tends to push them down to the lowest possible price. So, and that applies to goods, but it also applies to services. Look at financial services. Way back when you wanted to sell or buy a block of shares with a full service broker, it cost you $200 or more. Today, it costs as low as $0, right? I used to say $3, but just in the last few months, it's gone to $0. Right? You can pay $0 money to be able to do that. And it's because of the rise of internet brokers like E-Trade and so forth. So, so you see that force of commoditization, no matter what business you're in. If it can be sold over the internet, then there's this force of commoditization. So you got to forestall the forces of commoditization, and the way to do that is to shift up and go beyond those goods and services to staging experiences.
Yeah, and look, you may have answered this already with your brokerage example, but if you think about 2007, so which is sort of 9 years after you published the book, we were at a billion internet users. At 2012, we were at 2 billion. And then just last year, we were approaching 4.5 billion. So do you see that escalation of internet consumption has escalated that commoditization effect as well? Or do you think we've passed that critical mass?
No, I think it is still accelerating. That as more and more users get on, they didn't have access to it. You think about, places in India and Africa and other places, China, of course, where you didn't have access much 15 years ago. So now, whenever you've got a middle class and even a lower end, people are going to want to buy things at a lower price, and companies are going to offer it because now they can reach so many more people. Right, you used to have some geographic separation that kept some of those forces of commoditization at bay because you only competed with competitors in your geographic area. But now you literally compete against the world. It means that you can access people, and there's always going to be somebody who's going to be willing to sell it more cheaply.
Do you think there's been other forces of maybe just not commoditization? It may be some other technology or change in society that is recent that you see as a game changer with the same kind of effect?
Well, I think that one is the use of digital technology in and of itself outside of the internet, that the rise of augmented reality and virtual reality and 3D printing. 3D printing is basically is the digitization of atoms, of physical things. Is what's going on there. And that has had a huge impact and will continue in the future with it's why one of my books I wrote is called Infinite Possibility, Creating Customer Value on the Digital Frontier. And it's all about how you use digital technology to fuse the real and the virtual. And I think that's a big deal that you see today. In experiences, one of the things that's only been around, you can go back to the late 2000s, I think, is when smartphones or phones, and forget smartphones, just phones, probably then early 2000s, when phones started having cameras, right? And the ability to take pictures of any experience that you're having, right? It's seen a big shift from not just buying physical memorabilia for the experience, but having these digital memories. In fact, I get a kick out of, I see more and more that people use the term memory when they're actually referring to a photo.
Right.
I've seen it for businesses, I've seen it for consumers, right? Isn't that interesting? Right?
We've outsourced cognitive function now.
On our cloud. Right? My memories are in here. That's just a digital representation of it.
Right.
But that's going on. So we see the rise of Instagrammable places, right? Instagrammability is places to experience. Think of the Museum of Ice Cream, the Rosé Mansion, and all these other places where people are basically going to be able to be in a big scene that looks beautiful on Instagram and taking their selfies and posting them there and in Facebook and Twitter and so forth. And so you include with that is that whole rise of social media. And then the other big thing, I would say, and it gets back to my first book, it gets back to the internet, is the rise of customization, of being able to customize our goods, our services, and increasingly our experiences for each individual person. It's in fact how I discovered the experience economy is from my work on mass customization, where I realized that mass customizing a good turns it into a service because it's done on demand. It's done when the customer says this is what they want, and it's not inventory, but it's produced on demand and so forth. Well, I realized that services then our customization turns services into experiences. That when you design a service that's so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the service that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn it into a memorable event, turn it into an experience. So the internet now allows us to interact with billions of, not just millions, but billions of customers around the world, to interact with them individually. And then with mass customization techniques, we can then customize our goods, our services, and our experiences to them.
Yeah, and this is something that, I think in recent times, the digital marketing world has picked up on a lot around this term personalization. I wrote an article about that on Paul Greenberg's column on ZDNet at the start of this year, and the journey we've been on there. And it continues to be a journey as we figure out, how to not break social contracts and things like that, as we look to engage in more and more personal ways. And experiences are so personal in nature because experiences are about perspective, right? In many ways.
Yeah. Well, experiences are inherently personal.
Yeah.
No two people, even if in the same place at the same time, no two people can ever have the same experience, because where does it happen? It happens inside of us. It's our reaction to the events that are staged in front of us.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
The more personal you get, the more engaging you can be, the better you reach inside of people and create that experience. Commodities are these arm's length things we hardly ever touch and feel anymore. Goods are objects that we own, like our cars, like our books, like our shirts and so forth. But services are activities performed on those objects, like cleaning my service, changing my shirt, changing the oil in my car, or cutting my hair, right? But they're all outside of us. Experiences for the first time reach inside of us. And that's, again, a fundamental distinction.
That's in fact, if anyone takes anything away from the show, I know you wanted to take a couple of things before. To me, that's probably one of the most fundamental truths of the experience economy. I'd like to change tack a little bit here. One of those areas of your work that I've really related to is this notion around businesses finding a way to make to treat their goods as props and their services as a stage, right? And you mentioned it a little bit earlier. I'm an old drama student, so
oh, really? That's
yes. So I've got a performing arts background, and I think I really like your example there, because to me it speaks to this notion around how liberal arts and creativity in general really needs to find a more permanent and more valued home within corporate, businesses and institutions. What's your view on that connection of creativity or performance, as you've called out, but other forms of creativity in business today?
Yeah, I'll go back to the original subtitle of the experience economy, which is work is theater and every business is stage. And we literally mean that when you are in the business of staging experiences, your work is theater. Whenever you're in front of customers, whether you do it, whether you know it or not, whether you do it well or not, you're on stage and need to act in a way that engages the audience, right? One of the key things with experiences is you've got to design the time the customers spend with you. And that means that you're adding in drama, right? You've got to have drama is when you have an experience that rises up to a climax and then comes back down again, right? That's basically what drama is. And most companies, when they design experience, though, it's very flat. A lot of companies are even afraid of drama. Well, drama, that means something's going wrong. That means that they're not getting exactly what they want. They're not, it's taking too much time and so forth. No. Drama is good, right? Yeah. Even like you think of going to a Starbucks and you give your order to one person, but it's going to come out someplace else. Where exactly is it? When is it? Is that my order? Do they say my name? Does that look like my cup? Is it? Right? That's drama. And that little mini drama there adds an element of experience just in ordering a Starbucks.
Yeah, I love it. I've always felt as well as I've immersed myself into the space over the last 5-10 years, that, as an example, when I was a drama student, I used to invest a lot of my time into character development. I didn't just want to read a script. I wanted to know what was behind the words. So what were the motivations? What was the character's fears and aspirations, and what was their psychology, right? And now if you spend time in a marketing team, you'll hear them talk about personas and archetypes, right? So it's not the first area that we see this borrowed from. I think we could probably be better at that. I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, our target is soccer moms, and it's like, well, that's a nice headline. Like, what does that mean, right?
And it only describes hundreds of millions of people. So
so we call that targeting, do we? Right. But the notion is right. The notion around who are we talking to is right.
Right. Although I always think you need to get beyond the personal level and think about the individual. It's always an individual, living, breathing person that buys from you.
That's right.
Personas don't buy anything, and people have multiple personas. Right, that they can exemplify. We tend to just pigeonhole people and then target them and push all our stuff to them rather than pull out from them what it is that they really, truly want and need. I actually did a webinar earlier today with a product information management company, and most of their clients develop websites. And the principle of theater applies not just if you're in a physical place and we're talking one-on-one. It applies if you're in a chat room. It applies if you're doing it over email, if you're in a contact center and talking to somebody on the phone, and it applies to the website as well. One of my favorite books is Brenda Laurel's Computers as Theater, where she makes the point that we need to think of the computer not as a tool, but as a medium for experience. And she's actually the one who introduced me in reading her book to the topic of dramatic structure and what that's all about. So it's very important when you design a website even, that you think about the drama that people have, not just the customer journey, which is really your journey of what you want the customer to do that ends with buy, buy, buy. Right. It's the actual drama of the website and how you engage them and draw them through, entice them to come through and be engaged and spend more time on your site.
Joe, I want you to hold that thought because I'm going to bring you back to it. It speaks a little bit to a subject I want to unpack a little bit with you. I'd like to just take a business-to-business lens for a moment. In the series, I'm going to try and do that a little bit. I think sometimes there's been almost a propensity from some of those, particularly in the more, I guess, traditional tranches of B2B, like manufacturing, et cetera, to kind of go, well, all that stuff's interesting, guys, but it's really for the B2C world. It's for the consumers, right? And if I talk about, for a moment, this notion of marketing in inverted commas in any sentence structure, but you replace that word marketing with experience, I really wonder, because we're getting to this nub of the fact that we're engaging with humans, no matter what type of business.
Exactly.
Whether that gap is justified today as perhaps it used to be. What's your view on that?
No. There'll always probably be a gap between consumers and business. Right. Consumers are much more willing to pay money for things that they're not sure of the value. They'll take a flyer on the value of particular experiences because until you've experienced it, you really don't know how good it is. Even if people have told you, we've all been to movies that somebody told us was a great movie and you thought it was rubbish. But business people are sort of more hard-nosed, as we would say. They do want to understand the value, but it gets back right to what you said, Aarron, is that business people are people too, right? They're human beings, and they much rather spend their time in engaging experiences than in boring meetings, for example. Yeah. One of the ways I like to think about it is liking it. Let me compare going to a theme park. Right, like going to Walt Disney World. My wife and I earlier this month were at Walt Disney World. We were in Orlando for a week, and we pay an admissions fee to go in. And we have a wonderful experience. Now, sure, we buy goods and services. We buy, we actually often say you buy Mickey Mouse hats and watches. We in fact came back with 2 droids from Star Wars Galaxy Edge, and you buy services, parking services, food services, photographic services. But why you go and why you pay that admission fee that signals this is an experience is because of the shared family experience that you have with memories that last not just for days and weeks, but for months and years afterwards. So you think about B2B is I submit that going to a trade show is just the business to business equivalent of going to Disney World.
Right.
You're paying an admission fee to go in this huge area with all these different attractions, different lands even, and then attractions within them. They're all trying to get you to spend time with them, and you're buying goods and you're buying services, and they all want you to buy their goods, right, in the trade show, if not right there, then when you get back home, as memorabilia for the great experience that you're having. So you do, in fact, see it in business to business. I'll mention Dassault Systems in France has taken all of its CAD/CAM software and put it under the rubric of a 3D experience platform. That they want engineers to have an experience in designing the product, right? Design in 3D is much different experience than on first of all, on paper, or than the flat, 2D screen sort of world. But once they have that experience, they can design things so much better because of the 3D experience. Then they can turn it over to marketing and sales, and they can use these same exact designs and be able to show off their product. Again, the product experience management. And then you can give them actually designs to customers and let them see products that have yet to be even produced that could be customized for them, and let you experience those, as the end consumer in this chain. You also, I'll just give one more example. We can talk about more if you want, but one of my favorite examples in the world is case construction equipment right now. If you can do it with huge, big behemoths of construction equipment, you ought to be able to do it with most anything in B2B, right? So Case has created the Tomahawk Experience Center in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, the US, where they bring potential customers up to literally play with the equipment. Right? It's like a giant sandbox, and they have rodeos and contests about who can move the most amount of dirt in the shortest amount of time. And Case did a study, and they found that a normal potential customer goes up to one of their dealers, they have perhaps a 20% chance of getting the business. They go to the Tomahawk Experience Center, it goes up to 80%. From 20% to 80%, because the fundamental principle, the experience is the marketing. Right? The primary way of generating demand for your product, whatever it is with an experience so engaging that people can't help but spend time with you, give you their attention, and buy up as a result. And that's true for consumers as it is for B2B.
Yeah, I think so too. And I had secretly hoped that you would tell that story. I've heard you tell it a couple of times. I know that you love it, and it's I've actually borrowed it from you a couple of times talking to people as well. So I confess it's an amazing story, that one. And I like how you. No, yeah, but the invoice is in the post or something, right? The thing that I like there as well, you reminded me of an experience I had a little while ago. You talked about the experience as the marketing. I was at an event not long ago, or listening to a guy speak who's quite a prominent CMO in this part of the world. And his comment was, if you get the marketing organization right, you don't need the sales organization. And I know a lot of people I talk to go, you know what, if you get the experience right, you don't need the marketing organization, right? Exactly, so we're all busy making each other redundant here. It's
a famous Peter Drucker quote. I don't know if he knows he's quoting Peter Drucker, but it's a famous Peter Drucker quote, which is that the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous. Right, to which we have added many times and written about this, that the aim of experience is to make marketing superfluous. Right, that you get rid of that, you use experiences as the demand generator. And in the new book on competing for customer time, attention, and money, one of the things we say on the money side is you need to shift your advertising to experience ratio. You need to stop spending so much money on advertising, on targeting, as we talked about, on what fundamentally advertising is. It's interrupting the experience that people want to be having at this moment in time. That's what an ad is. Stop doing that. And instead shift your money into experiences that actually entice them, engage them, and get them to want to buy your product as a result.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, I have to ask this question. It's one of, for me anyway, and I hope it's interesting to the audience, but it's certainly interesting to me. A piece of your work where you have had this proposition that possibly experience economics or the experience economy is possibly the last fundamental economic shift. And, I can almost feel people shift in their seats when you say that, right? It's almost like, was the world about to end? We're so conditioned now to change. Surely, if we've learned anything, the only thing we know is that the only constant is change, that kind of thing. But you have some really interesting propositions around that. I'd love you just to expand on that idea.
Right. Well, in fact, and we wrote about this, we talk about it, experiences are in fact not the final economic offer.
Okay. So you've just blown away my question.
And then I say no more.
Okay.
Right? Then I say no more, and then we can have a debate about it.
Okay.
But there is at least what, because we always ask what's next, right? It's always what's next. And you really have to think richly. We've developed so many wonderful frameworks by asking what's next. And we asked it around the experience economy. And recognizing again that customization is the antidote to commoditization. Commoditization is like the law of gravity, right? If you do nothing else over time, you're going to be commoditized. Right. But customization lifts you up. It's the antidote. If you customize your offerings for a particular customer, you can't help but be differentiated. And so what happens when you customize an experience? What happens when you design an experience that is so appropriate for this particular person or business at this moment in time? Well, then you can't help but turn to what we often call a life-transforming experience. In other words, an experience that changes us in some way, right? And that we call a transformation. And a transformation is the fifth and final economic offering in this progression of economic value. We're using experiences as the raw material to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspirations, in other words. And that's the most economic value you can provide, is to help somebody achieve their aspirations. And many businesses are naturally in the transformation business. Think about fitness centers. Why do people go to fitness centers and endure all that work, sweat, and pain? Because they think the gain will be worth it. Healthcare why is it such a big part of GDP today? It's not just that costs are rising so much, it's that people value it so much more highly because it transforms us. It allows us to live longer, allows us to recover from illnesses, from injuries, and so forth. And we value that so much more highly than we did in the past. And healthcare is about university, education is about transformations, and so forth. So, and we, you brought up B2B. I think B2B is very crucial to recognize the value of transformation, because no customer of yours ever buys your offering because they want your offering. It's always a means to an end. And if you sell the end rather than the means, then you'll gain much more economic value. And that end is changing the business, right? People are buying these offerings from you because they want to change business, a better business as a result. How do you help them achieve that surrounding that core offering you're selling them? But how do you go beyond that to help them change their business for the better?
Yeah, okay. And transformation is something that you can't get more personal than that, right?
Right. Well, yeah, beautiful point, Aaron. We talked about experiences happening inside of us. Well, guess what? Transformations change us from the inside out. You're exactly right. You can't get more personal than that because you're actually changing people as a result. Now, there's a lot of moral issues with that, that you're changing people. We are all, as the saying goes, we're all the product of our experience. You need to be thinking richly about that. You need to apply not just data and information and knowledge, but wisdom in doing that well. But there's, again, so much more economic value. And increasingly, that's what people will be looking for, is not just experiences that are fleeting and ephemeral, but looking for lasting transformations from the experiences that they have.
Yeah, very powerful stuff, because it's more than about business growth and growth strategy and all these things that we spend our time thinking about. It's far more fundamental than that, isn't it? It's very human.
Exactly. Well, and the way to think about it is, with transformations, the customer is the product. Right? The customer is the product. It doesn't matter all these what products you provide, doesn't matter what services you do, what activities you do. The only matters is, did the customer achieve their aspiration or not? And like you say, that is as personal as you can get. Yeah.
I'd like to change tack again a little bit. I have a proposition. It's something that I've always felt, and I'd like to test it with you. Mm-hmm. In my work, I think you're aware, I spend a lot of time in this domain that everyone calls CX now. So CRM, customer engagement, that whole growth that kind of space.
I see what question's coming, but go ahead.
Okay. For me, I'm a critic of that space sometimes, and the language that's used, and and I can feel some colleagues sharpening their knives as they listen to this. But there's this obsession sometimes with terms which I think are misused, and the dominant one I think at the moment is this term frictionless, right? Where I need to qualify that quickly, probably, because it's important that obviously we have there are important parts of a customer journey that are as low touch and as easy to navigate as possible. They are, for all intents and purposes, as frictionless as we can make them. And transactional touch points is a great example of that. But if I'm a growth strategist today, and my job is about building lifetime customer value, then I need to build engagement. And the way that I need to build engagement today is through experiences. That is the birthplace of a memory that creates the emotion that becomes my brand perception. And there's a lot of I think, danger in the way that we pull everything into this frictionless world. I know that if I need to engage someone at a certain level, I need to elevate their cognitive state. I need to get them out of the subconscious where it's all frictionless and easy. And I need to have targeted points of what I call designed friction. Now, you can replace the word friction if you like, but that's the term I use because I'm trying to create meaningful, lasting engagement. And that means I need to engage people cognitively. And that means I need experiences, which means I can't be frictionless at those points. Right. What's your perspective on that?
And drama could be another word you could put there for friction. Right. Drama is friction. That's again why a lot of companies are afraid of it. You said that so well, Aarron. I'm not sure I need to add anything because I agree exactly with you. So I guess I'll put it this term because increasingly when people use the term CX or customer experience, right, one of those terms you're talking about. Right. They tend to mean they mean frictionless, right? Let's make our interactions with customers nice and easy and convenient. And those are all well and good, but nice, easy, and convenient and frictionless are service characteristics. They're not experience characteristics.
Right.
Right? So nice is nice, but rarely does it rise to the level of memorability. And if you didn't create a memory, then you didn't create an engaging experience. Easy, when we want to make things easy for customers, often we routinize them for our employees and our processes, and that's where frictionless really comes in. As easy as frictionless, then it really gets in the way of being personal. And again, experiences are inherently personal. When you routinize things, you treat everybody the same, and that's often the case with frictionless services. And then convenience is the antithesis of what I'm talking about, because convenience means let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Let's spend as little time with your customers as possible. And time is the currency of the experience economy. And time is what people value when they're buying an experience from you. The way to think about it is this way, is that services are about time well saved. And there we want it to be nice and easy and convenient. We want it to be frictionless. In fact, consumers and increasingly business people want goods and services to be commoditized, to be bought at the lowest possible price with the greatest possible convenience, so they can spend their hard-earned money and their hard-earned time on the experiences that they value. So while services are time well saved, experiences are time well spent. Right? Time well spent, that you actually value the time that you spend with. And what drama is again, what theater is again, is designing time. It's designing the time that customers spend with you. And that doesn't mean frictionless. Now, and you're a technology guy too. So let me mention that you think about this progression of economic value from commodities to goods to services to experiences and even to transformations, is that it's a stack. Right? It's a stack, and they're all built on top of each other. Right. You can't transform without experiences. You can't have experiences without services. And you do want the service aspects to be frictionless, to be nice and easy, convenient. Right? Think about going to a Disney theme park again. You want to spend a half hour trying to get your ticket and get into the gate. Right? That's the part that should be frictionless, so that you can then go spend your time on everything that you came there for, the time well spent. Right? And so on with goods and services. And I'll add this too, is that transformations We talked about services as time well saved, goods as or experiences as time well spent. Transformations are time well invested. So that people invest their time, that they get compound interest that pays dividends now and into the future because the experience is actually changing them for the better in some way.
Right. And these are the sorts of concepts that you've introduced in your more recent release of the book, right?
Yes.
This notion of competing for customer time and attention and money.
Yeah, and that time model is in there in this the new preview to the book. So what we say is that time is the currency of experiences, and what people are buying from you is their time spent well. And the number one competitor for any company in any industry, consumer or B2B, for the attention of customers today, excuse me, is in fact the smartphone. That people can instantly drop down into a virtual world on their smartphone through just a tap or a swipe, and then they're out of your experience. And then while money should never be the purpose, making money should never be the purpose of any company, it is the measure of how well you fulfill your purpose.
Right.
And so we talk about time and the importance of it, the value of it. And there's been an explosion over the last 20 years in the number of experiences that people can spend their time in, whether that's in the real world or in a virtual world. And then attention, as we talk about the basic models in the book that allow you to capture people's attention by making your experiences first robust, then cohesive, then personal, as we talked about with mass customization, then dramatic with theater, and then finally even transformative for some people. And that's all about capturing their attention, keeping their attention, and using that to create that great experience, even that transformative experience. And then with money, we introduce some new measures. Excuse me. The key one is the money value of time, or MVT.
Okay.
Right. You're familiar with the time value of money.
Right.
And there is the old saying, time is money. Well, that means that money is time as well. And so the key way to measure your experience is by understanding how much money are people spending per unit of time, right? Your expenditure per minute, we call it. That's your MVT. And think about it this way. If you go to a movie, you're spending around, differs in various areas and so forth, times a day, weeks, but you're spending around 10 US cents per minute. That's what a movie is worth. That's a good experience. If you can get people to pay you 10 cents a minute for for your experience, and that's great. And all that takes, for example, is like a half hour in Starbucks. And you spend a half hour in a Starbucks and you price out your latte, and then you're paying around 10 cents a minute. Then think about going to, again, a Disney theme park. They get around 20 cents per minute, right? It's twice as much. That's an even greater experience. If you get 20% per minute, you've got a great experience. But these Instagrammable places I mentioned, like the Museum of Ice Cream, or you think about escape rooms, something that didn't exist 20 years ago. Now there's over 10,000 of them around the world. The escape rooms and those sorts of places get around 40 cents per minute, another order of magnitude. And then it just goes from there. There are experiences that you can spend dollars per minute, hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars per minute for the experience. So you can use that to measure how great an experience you, in fact, are staging, because money is that key measure of the experience.
Yeah, look, I love that piece of work. I think it's a bit of a changer in terms of how organizations start to think about experiences more critically beyond something that's almost a bit ethereal or fluffy on their marketing program, or what they, want to purport to be, or who they want to be, or how they want to, present a brand to market. That it's actually almost it's more economic at its root and at its heart. I know that there'll be a bunch of folk that are going, this is great. Tell me where this is happening. How are people using it? What are the stories? And you've already given the case story. And I know you could probably do this for days. And I almost want to let you because it'll be fun. But in the interest of people getting back to doing other things and they're not listening to this, give me your top three. What's your favorite stories? What's some of the interesting stories you've seen around?
Well, that's a great question. I'll start with, because if many of your listeners are not high tech, but low tech, and not big businesses. I'll get the question, well, this applies to big businesses and so forth. And I often say, well, Starbucks was once a really small business. It was a manufacturer, and then they turned it into an experienced stager. But I'll start with one that is part of a very small chain of hotels. It's my favorite boutique hotel in the world in Manhattan called the Library Hotel. And the Library Hotel is boutique. I said it's 10 floors and 6 rooms in every floor. The theme of it is a little bit more subtle than its name. Right? Every great experience should have a theme. That's what makes it cohesive when I talked about cohesive experiences. But the theme is Dewey Decimal System, the system for categorization of library books. And knowing that, when you go into the doors, you go to registration, guess what you see? Well, you see a card catalog, of course, and there's bookmarks lying around in that. And then as you get your room, in fact, you see that the architecture of it, the theming architecture, is based off the Dewey Decimal System. There are, again, 10 floors, and each of them is a different classification, the Dewey Decimal System. There's a math and science floor, there's a literature floor, and an art floor, and so on and so forth. And then every room is a different sub-classification. And when you go to your room, it's filled with books and with art objects from that particular classification. Right. So if you love books like I love books, as you can see here, then it's just a wonderful place to be. And they keep adding on to it and doing things. I came back one time and they painted the stairwells like you're in a library and looking out onto the meadows and that sort of thing. The little key packet that you get, right? In most places you throw those away once you know what your room number is. Here it becomes cherished memorabilia because it's actually a tiny little book of sayings about libraries. Right, and so just all these wonderful little elements.
Clever.
Right, so now I'll go completely high tech. My favorite example of mass customizing goods and services in order to create a great experience is Carnival Corporation, the cruise company. And what Carnival has done is they've created an IoT device called the Ocean Medallion, and I've got one here. It's about the size of a large coin. Communicates with the ship in 3 different ways, and it allows them to know exactly who you are, where you are, and to learn your preferences and remember them over time, so that they call it the guest genome, where they learn about you, what you like to do, what experiences you like to spend time in, what you say, as well as recognizing, experiences are time well spent. So if you spend more time than experience than most other people, the chances are you like that experience better. So we can offer things like that. They create a mass customized personal guest itinerary for your cruise experience, and the second time you go, it gets even better, the third time better than that. They can even remember things like when you're on the pool deck with your kids, your favorite drink is an iced tea with no lemon. When you're in the bar with your buddies, it's a mojito. And when you're in the restaurant with your spouse, it's a glass of Shiraz. Right? Understand the digital context of what I'm in. And they started with 1 ship on the Princess Cruise Lines, and then 3, 5, 6. Now they're working on their 7th ship, I believe it is, there. And then they're going to start to move from brand to brand to brand until they get all 100 of their ships covered with this. And then continually to use machine learning to get it better, to continue to add new offerings on top of it. Because for the first time, we know who our customers are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's a wonderful example.
Yeah.
And so I think you asked for 3, I'll give you one more. One of the things we didn't talk about, I alluded to it, is that because time is so important, it's time well spent. In the experience economy, what you really should be doing is charging admission for your experience. Right? That economically, what turns it from a service into experience is when you stop charging for activities and start charging for your customers' time. It was probably one of the most controversial things we said in the original book. We said that retailers and restaurateurs and manufacturers and all these companies would charge admission in the future, and that's exactly what happened. There's hundreds of companies now that are doing it. My favorite example is a small little one-place company, a clothing store actually out in San Francisco called Wingtip. And the founder of the store, co-founder, Ami Arad, was designing his store, and he read our book, among others that he was using to help him out. And he got to the place in chapter 3 where we asked, what would you do differently if you charged admission? And he said, well, I'm a clothing store. I can't charge admission. You can't. If people wouldn't come, I wouldn't be able to sell them clothing. Why would you do that? But it gnawed at him, right? And he kept thinking about it. And finally, he hit upon it. What he could do is he could have the store, but then he could also create the Wingtip Club. And the Wingtip Club could be a membership fee offering where you're paying per month. So he prototyped it out in a really small store. He figured out that it worked, and then he leased out this floors in the old Bank of Italy building in San Francisco, across from the Transamerica building, the big triangle one. Right. And the first floor in the basement, where they had the old vault, is the Wingtip store, and then the top 2 floors are the Wingtip Club. And there he then charges. They have 3 different levels of membership tiers, but the most basic level, or the most common level, is a $3,000 initiation fee, and then $200 per month to belong to the club. And it's a big success, right? It's a wonderful place. It's vibrant. They have all these different experiences. They layer on top of it event after event. I learned at the club how to saber a champagne bottle. What a wonderful experience that was. And so you go to the store, you learn about the club. Chances are you go up, you become a member. You go to the club, you might want to buy more from the store. You sell more that way, and the synergy is really great. Yeah. And all came down back to him asking, what would we do differently if we charged admission?
That's a great story, because it's easy to find examples out of the entertainment space, perhaps, or you think about a great bar that always has good bands and you're happy to pay like a cover charge to get in so that you can then go buy drinks at the bar, which is where they make their real money, right? So the notion's not new, but the application in a business like that, or other businesses that you would never think about it, maybe historically, that's really spinning the dime a little bit.
Right, exactly. And like I said, think of all the manufacturers that charge admission. The Heineken experience in Amsterdam, the Volkswagen's Autostadt in Wolfsburg, Germany, the World of Coca-Cola in Atlanta. 6 weeks ago, I was in Dublin and went to the Guinness Storehouse. It's a €25 admission fee, for an hour and a half production, which is around that 40 cents per minute. But you can buy Guinness. You get some free as part of your experience. You can buy all this memorabilia. You can go to the restaurant, go to the bar. Once you start adding the F&B and the memorabilia in there, it even becomes a much greater expenditure per minute. But it's all predicated on the experience that you design for your guests.
Joe, this has been fantastic. Before I let you go, what I've decided to do, and I'm really privileged to have a really strong lineup of international guests that'll be on the show. They're all accomplished and wise people, but they're also just great human beings that are generous with their time. And I wanted just to give the opportunity, if you were leaving any advice for the folk there today, and it literally can be anything, life, personal, career advice, experience economics, whatever you like. What would you like to leave listeners today?
Well, I'll combine or intersect the personal and the business, right? Which is to think about purpose. And I talked about theme as an organizing principle. I actually have this model of like 4 or 5 different levels of purpose. And it begins with the acting intention around theater, goes to your theme, your organizing principle. But above that is the meaningful purpose of the company. And every company needs to have a meaningful purpose that aligns what they do, that allows people to decide and know what it is that they're supposed to do without having to always be told all the time, because they align with a purpose. And so you need to have a personal purpose. You need to think about what your personal purpose is, and make sure then that the company you're working for aligns with that purpose, that the two purposes, and not that they're exactly identically the same in that. That's not going to happen very much. But and I'll give you an example. What I say now, and I went through this exercise myself 4 or 5 years ago and thinking about this, is that my purpose as an individual person, and then our given our 3-person partnership, it's becomes basically the same thing for me. But my purpose is to figure out what's going on in the world of business, and then develop frameworks that first describe what's happening and then prescribe what companies can do about it. Right? And the shorthand version of that my partner, Jim Gilmore, and I have used for many years is frameworks are us. Right? That's the purpose. Frameworks are us. And so think about what is your purpose in life, and how you can then use that to align who you work for, what you do in a way that allows you to achieve that purpose in life while simultaneously achieving a business purpose for whatever company you work with or that you start.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, very personal in nature. And I think that describes your work in a nutshell. So again, thank you very much. I think you've nailed the brief, Joe. You've nailed the brief, and you have for a long time, not just today. I want to thank you for your contribution to business over a long time, but on a personal note again, for the value contribution you've made to my own work as well. I really appreciate it. And on that note,
to blush over here.
Well, before you blush too much, I can edit that out. I'll put a nice.
Okay.
I'll give you a nice tan. Yeah. Look, Joe, it's been insightful and a real pleasure. And thank you for headlining the premiere of Evolve. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed our conversation.
You've been listening to Evolve with Aarron Spinley. To ensure that you never miss an episode, please subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast player. Thanks so much for hanging out. Until next time.